this is Bill Freedman, your correspondent once again from Lunacon, and it is Saturday the 16th, going on 10 o'clock, time to start hitting the party circuit. But before I do, I want to tell you about the day while I still remember it. First thing, I was reunited with my former crit partners, Ken Altabeth and still occasional collaborator Ben Paris. We were in the History Happens Everywhere session this morning, which decries how everyone who writes historical fiction or has an historically based fantasy world tends to base it on medieval Europe and how boring that is. And Ken wrote an interesting series on Eskimo shamans, and he's kind of indicating there that his alt history was taking place in the tundra of northern Asia, and I talked a little bit about my screenplay, Errand Order, in which the family is descended from Lithuanians who were the last pagan country in Europe, and we're still working with the ragged end of Europe here, and people brought up how underrepresented South America is, and Southeast Asia and Southern Asia is in historical genre fiction. Very important point to be made. And Dr. Altabeth, class man that he is, classy man, acknowledged me and our crit partners in his three-part series, currently available from Blueberry Lane Books. All right. What else did we do today? Oh yeah, the best attended panel that I sat on was "What will they use for money?" which is odd because pretty much all of the business of writing panels were totally underrepresented by people actually wanting to sit there and listen to us. But when the subject was, what are we going to use for currency in the future? Wow, we packed the room. I think Ian Randall Strock was the big draw there. And his opinion, I think, was it doesn't matter. I mean, like me, Ian also worked on Wall Street. In fact, he worked there for probably about 4 or 5 times longer than I did. And but he's a storyteller, and he's a publisher, and he's an editor. And his point of view is, if it's got something to do with the story, put it in. If it doesn't have anything to do with the story, don't put it in. And that goes for any kind of world building you do, as long as it makes internal sense to you, and it's perfectly natural to the characters in the story, doesn't need to be mentioned. And but we also all agreed that one major reason why money is generally not discussed in sci-fi is that sci-fi writers don't have any, and don't know anything about it, and don't know anything about finance, and well, it's very easy to get caught in a BS loop. So they kind of avoid the subject. Okay, my third panel of the day. This was a busy day. Was on workshops, on writers' workshops. Now, I mentioned that I was in a writers' workshop with Ken and Ben, a few other people, some of whom I've interviewed in this format, all of whom are wonderful people, talented individuals, and we just didn't function as a group. And so, I mentioned that there were other people who had different experiences, who have strong ongoing crit groups that were frankly not on the model that LI Sci-Fi was. We tried to do Clarion-style crits, and that kind of first involves getting Clarion type people in the group, and that it was difficult to keep, to bring in and retain Clarion lads. I think his name is Phil DePietro, Morgan County, Jersey writers group. I mean, there you've got Paula Lama, you've got David Sklar, you've got a lot of talented people just living in that area. And, it's probably a whole lot easier to maintain a solid core of a writers group. And also they do more. They don't crit the way that LI Sci-Fi did. It's really not a Clarion style thing. It's more all-encompassing. It talks more about the business of writing as well as the craft of it. So maybe that's a model. Maybe next time I get involved in the writers group, we'll try that model instead. So good learning stuff here. But the most amazing thing about that panel was the moderator, a guy named Shahid Mahmood, who I was unaware of and pleasure of meeting him before. But he specializes. He's a publisher, and he specializes in the back catalog of famous authors and their estates. And he's fairly successful at that. And he, as a sidelight, just started this last year, but was successfully starting it again this year. There's a cruise, Norwegian, not Carnival, Norwegian. This good ship, and he's got people like Kevin J. Anderson and Mike Resnick. A lot of good gets as guest instructors on this cruise. And for like $1,400, you can spend 4 days on the high seas with some of the most talented people in the business and some of the most successful. Now, last year on the maiden voyage, Shahid took along a novice writer by the name of Ron S. Freedman, whose work now appears in Age of Certainty. And there, Shahid and I were sitting like right next to each other, and we found out we had this 1 degree of separation. We bonded on that. I posted that to the Age of Certainty's Facebook page. You could probably tweet it as well. But anyway, we just busted up when we found that out. So most unexpected surprise of the day was when I walked into the middle of the Hour of the Wolf recording session. Hour of the Wolf is a WBAI FM production, and it's a weekly radio broadcast about sci-fi and fantasy, and the authors thereof, and the fans thereof, and the enablers, the agents, the publishers, and it's hosted by this force of nature named Jim Freund, who it's funny. You talk to the guy sometimes in private conversation, hard to get a word in edgewise, just because he monopolizes a conversation because he really is more interesting than you. I mean, you can just sit there and listen to him forever, but then he flicks the switch and it's Hour of the Wolf time. And he is the quiet, sit in the corner moderator, letting the guests tell their story. And I got to see him in action, and also got a chance to ask one of his guests, Space and Time editor-in-chief Hildy Silverman, how does she manage to get in such great poetry quarter after quarter after quarter? And of course, the answer is Linda Addison. But every chance I get, I raise the flag of S&T as being the only genre magazine going that has poetry worth reading. And I think you've got some great poets in the industry, and I think you've got some really great anthologies and collections. But in terms of periodicals, S&T beats all comers when it comes to poetry, and I urge you to subscribe, even if just for that. Hildy on her side has also got quite an eye for a good, lighthearted adventure, sci-fi story, and I read it. I read S&T cover to cover every time it gets in the mail. I don't do anything else the rest of the day when S&T comes. Um, and also, you may know her husband if you don't know Hildy. Her husband is David Silverman, who is in Marilyn Monroe O'Hare's old job, president of American Atheists Incorporated. And he sneezed. In the middle of the broadcast, he sneezed. I mean, the mic is live. They are recording this this special broadcast. I mean, it's not live, at least. It can be edited, but right in the middle of the discussion, David sneezed, a big, loud sneeze, because, I mean, he might be an atheist now, but his name's Silverman. He's got a nose like mine, So, it was a loud sneeze. And after the recording was over, I walked up to Hildy and asked her, what do you say to an atheist when he sneezes? She had an answer, and I share that with you now. If an atheist sneezes, you do not say, God bless you, of course. They prefer happy trails. Testament to Roy and Dale. What do you know? So, anyway, that was nice. Also, the other guest on Hour of the Wolf was Charles E. Gannon, Chuck Gannon, who I had the pleasure of sitting on a panel with Friday night. And last I saw him was about 3 years ago when I was pumping Land That I Love, and I was at Balticon, and it was either like immediately before or immediately after the first time I actually sold a book that I wrote to somebody who wanted to read it. I was on a panel with Chuck, and so I've had some successes, and in the past 3 years, Chuck has had by far more. He is now co-writing 2 series with Eric Flint, and one of them being Eric Flint's 1632 series, and they've also co-created a world that they're writing in together. But I loved 1632, and I'm skipping over 33 and 34 because 35 just came out with Chuck as co-author, and Chuck signed really quite graciously a rather effusive, very nice, personalized message to me on a book that I bought. It's the hardcover first edition of 1635, and he and Flint had already signed this book for whoever was going to buy it from Larry Smith Books. But then Chuck, again, another classy guy, just sat down, took a couple minutes, and wrote a very nice private message, and I thank him for that. Well, it's about 5 after 10 on Saturday night at a convention, Lunacon 2013, and I'm still sober. So time to do something about that. Hope everyone has a great evening, and